So I'm going to introduce Asia, our moderator, and Asia will introduce all of the speakers. Asia, I'm so excited to introduce you. So Asia is our founding member for Philly Mastermind, and it's the second year she's been with us. Asia is an on-air host, journalist, and an actor. She currently anchors on Cheddar, the leading post-cable news, media, and entertainment company. She also hosts Keep It Short with Asia, a short-form news series on TikTok and IGTV. Before joining the Cheddar, Asia served as an anchor for national teen newscast, Channel 1 News, and has appeared on Complex, MTV News, VVH, SAG AFTRA Conversations, and the Build series. You also covered so many red carpets and award shows like GRAMMYs, MTV Videos, Global Citizen Festivals, and other special events. So we're so grateful to have you here to moderate this amazing panel. And I will give you the spotlight so you can get us started. And ladies, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much.
Summer, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very impressed. I feel like you're the moderator tonight. I just wanted to say thank you to Philly. I am a founding member of Philly, and I wanted to say thank you for organizing this event and hosting all of us virtually. And again, just thank everyone who's on the call today. I know it's a virtual event, but you guys could be anywhere else in the world, and you chose to be with us for this conversation, and that means so much to us, especially after the Thanksgiving holiday. We know a lot of people are getting back up and running on their weeks, but I think that's why it's the perfect time to have this conversation about giving back. All of us are reflecting about what we're thankful for this time of the year, especially during this pandemic. And we also know that from a corporate standpoint, philanthropy has become a pillar of big business. So I'm very excited to host this conversation with these dynamic women who walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to corporate philanthropy and giving back, not only just from an ethical standpoint, but also in their missions and how it applies to work. So we are so grateful to have each of our panelists here and get a lot of their insights on this. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. We have Olivia Owens. She is the creator and general manager of I Fund Women of Color. We have Kim Patel, who is an investor and head of partnerships at Bubble, and Kait Sheridan, founder and CEO at Runwell Global Consulting. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Really quickly here, we're going to do a quick introduction, like 1 or 2 minutes each, so you can sort of introduce yourself to the group. And then I think we're going to go ahead and dive into some questions. And you guys, we have so many questions, but we know you also do too. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or save them for the end, because we're hoping we can do a Q&A portion with everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. Olivia, do you want to go ahead and kick us off with a quick introduction of what your role is currently, and also how you sort of got set on this path of corporate philanthropy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the intro. Really, really excited to be here and have this conversation. So like Asia mentioned, I am the creator and general manager of I Fund Women of Color. If you're not familiar with I Fund Women, we are the go-to funding marketplace for women-owned businesses and the people who want to support them. We're focused on closing the funding gap by providing access to capital through crowdfunding and grants, expert business coaching on all the topics you need to know about, and then also a connected community of women founders going through the experience together. And in January of this year, I launched I Fund Women of Color, which is dedicated to addressing the unique obstacles that diverse founders face when it comes to accessing capital. We know there's a deeper disparity, particularly when it comes to venture capital in terms of the amount of funding that they're receiving. And so I work closely in building that community and supporting those founders and helping get funding into their hands.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. So concise. Let's go ahead and move on to Kim. If you can go ahead and give us a little bit of an intro and some background as to your role and also how you got on this path in corporate philanthropy.
Yeah, so I don't know if my video's not on, but so I am currently leading up partnerships at a company called Bubble. Bubble is a no-code platform that is on a mission to lower the cost of software development in this country and also help anyone become a builder. Anyone who wants to build any sort of software web application can without ever learning how to code. So it's essentially to reduce the barriers to be able to do that. And I've also been an investor for the last 3.5 years. I started advising BIPOC founders and women in 2016 in early stage startups, and then became an early stage investor focused also in the same cohort of founders. But I work with everyone across a lot of industries. So when it comes to corporate philanthropy, it actually kind of really started in my time as an operator in the media industry. I was working at what is now Verizon Media. Back then was Huffington Post, AOL, and then Vice Media afterwards. And in both of those situations, really, really focused on building out their essentially their philanthropy arm or giving arm and venture arm, which is like working on D&I initiatives along with giving back to the community. So kind of have seen this in terms of impact investing, in terms of what I do as an operator right now at Bubble, and then also the communities I've worked with like through startups and VC and through media. I've kind of just seen this at like very different angles.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And finally, last but not least, we have Kait Sheridan, who is joining us from Hong Kong. That is amazing. Thank you so much. I know it's an early morning for you, but we really appreciate all of you joining us, especially you, Kait. So tell us more about your role at Runwell and also how you got started on this path of corporate philanthropy.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, and good morning. As you can see, the sun is coming up here in Hong Kong. So I run a social impact consultancy, which is based here in Hong Kong, but our work is really all around the world. And I've been very lucky to work on both the NGO side and like the social movement side of things, along with working with companies and startups on figuring out their impact strategies. So it's been kind of a very interesting space in the last few years, especially as these things evolve. So it's just been fantastic to learn from the projects that I've worked on. And, you know, we're all gearing up in a way for Giving Tuesday, which is tomorrow, but today for me here, which will celebrate philanthropy in all of its forms all around the world.
Thank you, Kait. And I'm definitely going to ask you about Giving Tuesday in just a bit. But our first question for all of the panelists is, how are you really practicing corporate philanthropy and the art of giving back right now in your work? If we want to go the same way round robin, we can start with Olivia.
Sure. So it's interesting because I feel like the work that we do at I Fund Women is inherently philanthropic. Since we started, we have a pay it forward model where 20% of the standard fees from our platform made off of crowdfunding campaigns get invested back into campaigns on a monthly basis. So it's a pay it forward model. And really the way we built our business is we are only as successful as our entrepreneurs are. We make money when they make money. And so really in all the work that we do, from all the tools and resources that we offer, from the coaching, all of it is to ensure that our entrepreneurs are more successful. So I think when you build a business in that way, where it is a win-win-win model in all things, we partner with different companies to do grant programs for entrepreneurs. So we just announced our program with American Express. They just did a $2.5 million investment into 100 Black women-owned businesses on our platform. And again, we had to help those women get up and running. We had to help them get their crowdfunding campaigns up and running. we made money off the deal with American Express, of course, but that was $25,000 into a Black women-owned business when the average revenue for a Black women-owned business is $24K. And so I think because of the way and the mission of what we do is so geared towards helping women entrepreneurs be successful, it's been a really natural and organic way to ensure that philanthropy is embedded in everything that we do.
I love that concept of win-win-win, because I think that's sort of the central idea when you think about giving back in philanthropy, especially when it applies to corporations and businesses. It's the idea that not only doing good is good, but it's also good for business and for your community. Kim, I want to hear from you though. How are you practicing corporate philanthropy right now in your work?
Yeah, so I would say, especially like at Bubble, because the product itself is meant to break down barriers to be your own business owner, build your own tech product, whatever the case is, learn about development and how to build and STEM. One of the things that I've done is built out a partnership strategy that's focused on both a D&I initiative and also trying to get the product in front of as many people as possible for free. So we already do have a free like offering, but I have created a credit, like a perk program that I go out to younger like schools, not just like accelerators and incubators, but going out to like elementary schools and middle schools and trying to figure out how to get a product like this in front of them so students can start tinkering and learning about how to build tech and like what that actually means. Other ways have been like on the D&I front, creating a accelerator program for BIPOC founders to come through and learn Bubble and build a product in Bubble that could be monetized, could be their own startup. It's really empowering and enabling people. So I'm using, instead of giving dollars, using the product and providing it for free to as many of this like folks from certain communities as possible, to help actually break down barriers. So I think that's a form of what I would deem as like CSR, or corporate social responsibility. And the company is it's a core to its mission, helps that like we're also getting the brand out there. So that's actually pretty great for us. On the flip side, I also, I work with Harvard University as an alum, and I work with and as I'm like working with like certain types of communities, especially the ones where I come from, where I'm a woman of color. I came from a lower socioeconomic background. I actually like have served as a forcing function to make institutions such as a Harvard University, institutions such as my previous employers like Vice, to be a part of the community and focus on the people in their backyard, which they don't always do. During the COVID pandemic, there was something that big that we focused on, which was providing, which was forcing students to like understand what it meant to be starving, to actually need your basic necessities during the pandemic, whether it was through volunteering, whether it was through creating a grocery delivery service, whether it was through creating a service that was specifically done by only Harvard students across all of Boston in terms of getting help and aid and groceries and necessities to all the elderly in Boston, and like pushing those types of initiatives. So again, like to me, the way that I've done this is it's been in the form of dollars and donations, but it comes in so many other forms as well.
I think it's so important for you to touch on that, because there are so many different ways to give back. I think a lot of the time people think of corporate philanthropy and they think of dollar signs and what that means for their bottom line at a company implementing those different systems and programs. But there are so many different ways that you can make a difference with philanthropy. And we're going to touch on that in just a little bit. But last up here, I do want to hear from Kait about how you're currently practicing corporate philanthropy in your work. We know your work is entirely based on developing these programs for a lot of notable businesses.
Yeah, so my day-to-day is helping other organizations kind of figure out this strategy. But for my own business, do a few things, mainly paid volunteer days off, so VTO policy for my small but really amazing team. So making sure they have the flexibility to be able to support the organizations and the causes that they care about outside of the business. And then I regularly take on pro bono projects. So I have a couple going on right now. Mostly because, again, the services that I do are a lot of the time helping either companies, but also a lot of NGOs and community organizations on their, strategic planning, their theory of change, and their marketing, and really operations, anything that they need help with. So being able to offer that for free to organizations who might not have the resources at the moment to cover that, or are really just kind of in the need for a little boost that once their capacity is built, they can really expand their own impact. That's how I've primarily focused it for now.
Amazing. So we touched on this just a little bit with Kim, that there are so many different ways to give back. It's not just about money or time. There are ways that you can create systems and programs that benefit communities. So because Kim sort of heavily touched on this, I want to open it up for Olivia and Kait. What are some of the different ways that brands and also individuals, let's say employees at these companies, can give back or even bake this into the already existing systems in place at their corporations? And what do you think makes the most impact when it comes to making change or making a difference for the good of a community that you're serving?
Yeah, I can think of so many different examples, but I think in terms of the best place to start is understanding the deeper needs of whatever community it is that you're looking to serve. So while we know that the majority of our entrepreneurs cite a lack of access to capital as a top challenge of launching and growing their businesses, we also looked at challenge 2 and challenge 3 and how those two things might also be impacting that larger challenge. The second top challenge is access to mentors and advisors who can kind of show them the way, especially if they're a first-time founder. And the third part is access to connections, building their network, having a community who's going through that same shared experience. And so for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, we recognized that our community was going to be heads down on pivoting their businesses and what that looked like. And so we made all of our workshops free. We have outside experts come in and teach courses on our platform throughout the week. And so we opened that up to everyone, no paywalls. That's creating a certain level of access. When we work with our different brand partners on grant programs, we're fortunate that they come to us and they say, we don't want to just throw money at the problem. What is a way where we can really address it? For Unilever's Day of Service, Caress is the founding partner of I Fund Women of Color, which is a Unilever brand. And so Unilever partnered with us to do a mentorship program where they paired employees at Unilever with entrepreneurs in the community to get access to experts that they would never have access to without a program like this. And the feedback of just like the fact that this person gave me an hour of their time for a brand, that helps you show your employees that you are really dedicated to adding value and involving them in the process. And to the entrepreneur, they're seeing that Unilever is a company that really cares about entrepreneurs like me. And then those are relationships that have continued to bloom above and beyond the program that we created. So I think that's another way. And then the third way is another part of the program we are about to launch is the Dreams to Reality Fund, and it's giving them access to a grant and a $1,500 coaching scholarship for a year. So like once you get the funding, that's only the first part of it. Knowing how to best leverage it and get the most out of it is really key. So giving them access to a year of coaching to show them how to do that and give them that support system, it really is addressing that top challenge with the nuances below that create that top challenge. So those are some of the examples of what we've been able to do.
I have this really interesting quote from Forbes. It says, "Philanthropy increases brand loyalty when you practice it genuinely, giving back increases engagement by sharing a mission and a purpose with your customer base. I think this is signaling a trend that's really been growing over the past few years, and especially during the pandemic. We're seeing a lot of customers just wanting to shop more ethically, wanting to align with brands that also align with their own values and the nonprofits or the missions that they care about. So this is important, but like we mentioned before, beyond simply doing good is good for a company's bottom line. So this one is for all of you. How have you seen the benefits of philanthropy benefit businesses that you've worked with?
I mean, I know from the businesses that I've been at, and we've done like positive, tried to do corporate philanthropy in various ways. Like when I was at Vice, right? I think it's a branding thing, especially. It's definitely like sorry about that. It
The
definitely
joys of working from home. It's okay.
It's definitely like a branding plus. So for example, when I was at Vice, we were going through a tough time. We actually had just recently had a Me Too scandal play out in the press with one of our executives, and we definitely needed to rethink how our readers were going to portray what we stand for. And we've built an entire brand and mission on being the folks that are always telling the truth and like building, real journalism and like telling people stories who don't have the power to tell it themselves. And that was really important to us. And like, we didn't want all of it to be degraded away by one mistake, right? Or one thing that happened to us that was out of like, I have 2,000 employees, but one person decided to behave, in that way. And so it was really important to us to be able to show that to our community, to our readers, to our advertisers, that, we were committed to who we were and what was in our DNA. I think when you have instances like that, one thing I will say is that like I've struggled with this before, which is doing in my previous like operating positions, which is doing corporate philanthropy without genuine intentions. So like, the example I just used, there was a point in that journey where I was actually struggling to make sure that we were doing this for the right reasons and we were going out into market and not doing it just for a PR stunt. And I think that is something that we need to be very mindful of when we're talking about corporate philanthropy, especially as it relates to brands.
That is such a good point, and maybe Kate can weigh in on this. Have there been times before when you've been sort of towing that line with a client or a corporation where you had to sort of check things back into place? Maybe the motivations behind a specific campaign weren't exactly where they needed to be, and how did you sort of course correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I would say yes and no. Yes, in that there are instances that this happens. Working impact into your marketing and communications, it definitely is great for your business. The data is out there. Like, it attracts top talent, helps you retain employees, it helps attract consumers, especially, younger consumers more and more. So it definitely affects your bottom line in a very positive way. But I've never had to correct anyone because, today's consumers and employees are way more savvy, and they can see what's authentic and what's not authentic. And so brands that don't do this authentically or take it seriously, it's almost like the crowd can correct them. They will get that response organically, and people will see through, just because there are so many great campaigns out there. And in a way that the public's putting pressure on these companies to get smarter about how they're having an impact, which is why, CSR in a way is changing. And it's not as much about what you're giving out, but it's also like looking internally and how you're organizing your own structures and running, your team and what your culture is. And then if your culture is one way, how is that actually expressed in how you engage with customers or your partner ecosystem or investors or whoever you're talking to. So, there are different frameworks for sure to help companies do this. But I think that the people are starting to notice if it's not meaningful. And so companies have to step up, and they are.
Definitely. If these campaigns and these programs can survive Twitter in 2020, I think you're good to go. But that is definitely a trial by fire right now. I want to ask Olivia, especially because you are dealing with elevating and empowering primarily women of color and minorities. How do you think we as consumers or everyday people, maybe even employees at these companies, can hold these corporations accountable when it comes to the different things that they say they're going to do or the programs that they're putting in place, especially during this really volatile time, during the pandemic, also during the social justice movements that we've seen, holding police accountable, also just racial divides within our companies. There's just so much going on, and I think it's been great to see the responses unfold from a lot of major businesses that we maybe wouldn't have seen that from in the past. But how do we sort of hold on to that accountability point as well?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think that I can speak from the standpoint of an entrepreneur, because that's a lot of the conversations that I've been having right now. There's never been more resources for women of color entrepreneurs than there are right now, and opportunities to be featured, to partner, and there's this fear of how do we make sure this is not just a moment in time, and this really is a movement towards long-lasting change. And I think that from a personal perspective, around the time of the death of George Floyd, there was definitely a moment of things like this have happened before. This is how we have responded as an organization before, and typically the response is apolitical, we don't engage. And it was really a push from the people of color on our team to say, no, we believe something different needs to happen. This is not the same no longer works. And so I think part of it is using your voice. And just because something has happened one way before, it doesn't mean it can't change. It's just on you if you want to take that responsibility to voice the change that you want to see. So I think that's from like an internal working at an organization where we have 3 white co-founders. How do you make sure that your voice is being heard and you're using it? From the standpoint of the entrepreneurs, where they're getting all these opportunities, it's okay, a brand comes to you and says they want to partner. It's how do you lock them into a 2-year, 3-year deal? It's like, okay, are you really about impact? What can we do over a long lasting time, instead of just letting them use you as kind of like a checkpoint on their philanthropy plan. And then also it's about saying no to things that don't work for you. I think so often we teach people how to treat us. And so if you let somebody just get away with one time giving you the spotlight and not actually following through on it, that's going to continue to happen. So saying no and explaining why it's not going to work for you, to help educate people on the fact that the status quo no longer works. I think a lot of it comes from using our voice and putting out there what we want to see, and carving out that space for ourselves.
Those are such gems. And I think so many women on this event call can relate, and so many of our allies too, if we have any gentlemen joining us that I am missing right now. But I think as women, we sort of have grown up in this culture of just wanting to always do what is expected of us, and we don't necessarily think about the ways that we are training others to treat us. And I think this is such a pivotal time when we can sort of hit reset when it comes to those relationships, especially because as if you're a person of color or you're a woman in the workplace, you are offering a really valuable perspective that is needed, and you're being recognized for that valuable perspective. So I think that's a really good note, Olivia. And on that note, I do want to ask either Kim or Kait about this, because our event is called Active Listening. I think it makes a lot of sense that we talk about the idea of active listening and how that plays into corporate philanthropy. So if you have any thoughts about that, sort of on the opposite side of the table, we spoke about how we can hold these companies accountable. But if you're working at these companies or you're making the decisions at these companies, which I think a lot of these people on our call are, how can you make sure you are actively listening?
So I think one of the things that that I've thought about when it comes to active listening, right? It's definitely trying to understand also, trying to understand what your employees care about, right? Because there's one thing to say, like, your brand stands for this, your mission is that, and like, this is what we're going to work on because we, the business team, the PR team, the marketing team, the CSR team, think it's best. But it is also another to understand like how your employees see impact and what they think is impact and what they think is impactful for the company, and understanding how to take that into account, because those are the people that actually want to be, they need to be heard. And I think that's really important. I think sometimes we, as the business people, like myself, speaking for myself here, we tend to forget that those are our biggest stakeholders, because without them, company wouldn't be where it was. So I think that's definitely one key thing that I would suggest anybody who is working on initiatives like these, especially like that you're trying to push through, is trying to understand if your employees are just as passionate and understand the impact the company is actually making and why they want to do it, or crowdsource ideas.
I'd love to piggyback on that, just to add, when you're creating an initiative to provide some type of solution, i.e. what I have created with I Fund Women of Color, at some point you build something with an intent of what you want it to be, but you also have to be open and flexible to allowing it to transform into what the community you're looking to serve needs it to be. So I think that aligns with what Kim was saying. Like, even if you outline, like, this is the thing that you want to solve, that this is what you want to address, the community is going to tell you, whoever you're trying to serve is going to tell you what they actually need. And it's about being flexible to pivot and meet the need that is actually there.
Yeah, I would totally add to that. Like, as much as you can involve your employees too in shaping your program, like, you want to get, their excitement and their buy-in, especially if you're doing any kind of engagement activity. So asking them to join your team in brainstorming ideas or helping identify causes, and coming up with really creative ways to get them engaged is really, really important, especially now when we're all kind of out of the office and working from home. And also just, on the NGO side of things, it's super important to listen to them, because there are a lot of instances of businesses, small and large, coming in with a plan, and they're actually creating more work for those nonprofits. So it's super important that you listen to the organizations that you are aiming to support and hear how you can support them, whether that's through your product or your time. If it's financially, like, more and more now, unrestricted giving is extremely important, because people are changing their plans with the pandemic. So listening is very important all around, but it will help you have more impact and help you have a more genuine program that people will appreciate.
Kait, you talked about the way that people donate, especially during the pandemic. So many are being conscious of their budgets, and also the uncertainty around whether or not they may be employed within the next few months. And, we're having this event virtually. All of us are in our respective homes. How are all of you sort of feeling the effects of the pandemic and COVID-19 and just the social turmoil that we're feeling as a country and sort of transitioning out of? How are you feeling sort of the weight of 2020 as it impacts corporate philanthropy?
For us, I would say we were positioned to be a solution for something exactly like this. We have seen a massive increase in the amount of entrepreneurs who are turning to crowdfunding to pivot or prevent their business from closing. And so it's really just been about doubling down on what we've already been doing. And then I think on the flip side, we've seen that increase in conscious consumerism from people who do want to be more thoughtful about how they're spending their dollars and where their money is actually going and what it's supporting. And then we've also seen an increase in partners who were ready to shell out the cash for it. So I think we've just been so uniquely positioned to be a true solution for this exact scenario that it's just been about stretching ourselves to make sure that we're getting in front of as many people as possible so that they can leverage the solution.
If I could add to that, this year has been incredibly challenging and hard, and we're all isolated in many ways, but then connecting virtually, which also can be very tiring. And so it's really navigating this whole new world, not just for the work that you do, but also for your teams and just how you operate and balance everything. But, you know, I feel very optimistic because as hard as this year has been in many different ways, we've seen so many examples of generosity. For example, one project that I work on is Pledge 1%, and they're an organization that helps companies donate 1% of either their products, their time, equity, and or profit, or combination of those, to whatever charity they choose. And so when the pandemic really broke out in the US, they immediately were able to assemble a COVID coalition, which is a group of some of today's top companies who meet literally every week to talk about solutions and are sharing ideas together on how they as a community can respond or adapt their impact programs. Through that, a lot of tools have been created. There's now a virtual volunteering toolkit, which just was released the other week to help companies design employee engagement programs that are safe and that kind of accepts this world that we're in. So the corporate community is rallying together in whole new ways because of this. On the other side, through Giving Tuesday, it's a global day of giving that happens on the Tuesday after Cyber Monday and Black Friday. But this year we actually organized Giving Tuesday Now, which was in May. And that was an additional day that was added just in response to the pandemic. And it was launched like 5 weeks after we came up with the idea. And through that though, even though it was probably the worst that the world was in, the situation, we saw amazing amounts of generosity, like online giving matching what normally happens in December for Giving Tuesday. Like people were not giving less, they were actually giving more, and they were giving more time and in more ways. And so we'll see what tomorrow brings for Giving Tuesday, but the trend this year has been, from companies to businesses to individuals, people are really stepping up and trying to help as much as they can. And while, we're all experiencing this pandemic, wherever we live and work, in a way, like as much as that is uniting us, like what we're seeing is that there is this need to help and this like value of generosity that's actually connecting all of us.
That is really encouraging because I don't know, maybe I'm a skeptic, but when I first started sort of researching for our conversation with you ladies, specifically for Questions with Kait, I think about how you develop a lot of these international programs for social impact at major companies. And I was sort of worried to ask you about the pandemic to see how things were doing, because it seems like anything that's structured around goodwill might be, sort of on the chopping block, because so many companies are worrying about the standard indicators of success during this time. and how they can stay afloat. So I think that's a really encouraging note that there is a lot of this sort of climate of generosity during a really difficult time, for many, the most difficult time they've ever experienced in business. But because you brought up Giving Tuesday, I want to stay on that positive note. How has it sort of changed in regard to like the climate around giving back and philanthropy generally since you founded or were a part of the team that founded the holiday and now in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And one quick thing on the corporate philanthropy side during the pandemic, in a way, what I've seen is that companies, they can't avoid this. So while their kind of goodwill and their impact programs have to change and there are more internal worries, they're having to get more creative, and they're having to look at what's unique about them, what programs they are, how they're different, what expertise they can lend, like other ways besides, financial giving, to have an impact. And that's helping in lots of different ways. And also through Pledge 1%, more and more companies are pledging their equity on the road to IPO. So they're actually setting aside funds now to ensure that they're going to have impact later. So even while there's all this uncertainty, companies are coming up with new ways to keep this going, which I like to think about, because that is a very nice thought, especially as kind of the world is becoming more and more uncertain. For Giving Tuesday, a lot has changed. It was founded originally in 2012 at a community center, the 92nd Street Y in New York. Back then, like, hashtags weren't even a thing. Like, there was the Coney campaign, but like Ice Bucket Challenge hadn't happened yet. Like, it was pretty fresh and new. And so the whole project was an experiment to see if it could work. And immediately after the first year, Giving Tuesday was celebrated in every US state. And then we started getting leaders in other countries raising their hands, interested in taking the movement and adapting it for their own culture. So it's grown significantly. It's now in every country on Earth. It was celebrated on the International Space Station, so it's even outside of this Earth. But the really exciting piece about it is that it's always been built on these values of co-ownership. And the founders always say, like, it's about tools and not rules. So being able to equip and empower anyone, whether you're an organization, a business, a nonprofit, a school, a church, an individual, whoever you are, we believe anyone has the capacity to do good. So it's giving them the opportunity, some ideas and some tools to make that happen. And then as technology's evolved and the global landscape has changed, of course the way people are doing that has changed. And it's really exciting to see how it's developed. One example of this is in the past few years, there's been a whole new movement within Giving Tuesday called Giving Tuesday Spark, which was created by a 12-year-old for other kids to get them involved in giving. And they are leading everything. So it's their ideas, their tools. There's a whole website now dedicated to it. There's kids all around the world who are doing this. And so what's really caught on and what I think has helped the movement grow is this idea that, anyone can take it, make it their own, play their own part, and collectively that actually tells a really big story.
I want to switch gears with all of you and sort of talk about the startup landscape for women right now. So hopefully if anyone is on our call and you're a startup entrepreneur, or you're maybe raising funds for your business, your ears will perk up a little bit. Specifically for Olivia and Kim, Olivia sort of touched on this, but how would you describe the landscape for female entrepreneurs right now, specifically for women of color and during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I can speak to that from the investor standpoint. Right now, so I will say after everything that happened earlier the summer of 2020 with George Floyd, there was this massive push in the VC industry that was like, oh my God, wait, this is like a real problem. We should invest in diverse founders. We should invest in diverse talent. and what conversations were empty versus not. Honestly, it was a lot. Like, it was actually very difficult to tell somebody who was working at a firm at the time. I was in the middle of those conversations. I, was being asked by colleagues and partners alike to explain the difference between like minority versus Black versus a BIPOC versus, like, it was a tough time to be in the industry, because you were dealing with so many people just kind of coming at you, who had no idea why the problem even existed, right? And so that was like a whole battle in itself to explain. And as female founders going through the last like 9-10 months, the ones that and a lot of who I've worked with and advised and tried to help fundraise, it's, even during the pandemic, there's been more attention brought to it, and people are like, oh, we should take this meeting because so-and-so, it's female Black founder, like, should take the meeting, and that's how it's spoken about internally. Doesn't necessarily mean they're still going to get the investment. So what's kind of happening is people are willing to open their door. They're still not necessarily willing to write the check. And the barrier between those two things is putting outside of like, is the founder's background, the product, and the actual company. Like, there are all these other variables at play that people don't realize, softer variables, which is a matter of like, who's the founder's mentor? Do they have someone telling them how they should be talking to venture capitalists and investors? Do they have resources to be able to help them navigate these conversations? Do they have the support system? And the answer is no, because the communities and backgrounds in which they're coming from don't enable those to be readily available. Whereas the communities that other founders may be coming from, because they went to an elite school, because they grew up in San Francisco, because they, like, whatever it was, allows them to have the context and the needs that, like, get you the check at the end of the day. And that's unfortunate to say, but honestly, like, from my point of view and how I've seen things play out, this is what I've been seeing left and right. However, with that being said, the hopeful part of this is I've also been at the end of conversations where people are willing to listen. So there is an active listening portion of this, which is investors who've had years of experience, who run their own funds. If I say, hey, this person came in, they had the audacity to ask for like a $4 million round without even having a product built, but they happen to be two white guys from Stanford. Nothing wrong with being two white guys from Stanford, but if I'm gonna say, hey, I think it's, outside of it being early, I think we should actually think about the character of the founders for them to even think that that was okay, because I don't think that's okay for them to just expect us to write a check without them even having put the work in, just because of who they think they are. People are willing to actually have that conversation, and that is a fundamental difference.
I appreciate how candid you're being, because I think this is a world that is so mystified for a lot of people from the outside looking in. I'm wondering, Olivia, from your perspective, working on the entrepreneurial side, does this ring true for you, or how are you sort of seeing the pandemic affect this landscape for women of color right now? You had a hopeful note earlier, but I sort of feel like this is your cue. This is where I Fund Women of Color comes in.
Yeah, so much of what Kim said is exactly what we're trying to address. So women of color represent the majority of the new businesses started in our country every day. I mentioned the average revenue of a Black women-owned business being only $24K. And so the problem that we're addressing at iFund Women, the number that we can actually kind of have some impact on, we can't necessarily pound into investors why they should be investing into these founders, but we can help these founders build stronger, better businesses that are then more attractive for VCs. So when they come to the table they have that mentor, they've done the work, they understand how to have the conversation, they understand the language. And so really, I see I Fund Women of Color as helping women of color get to the starting block, because they're starting so far behind without that network, without the access to those resources, so that when they step into the room, they're prepared. And so I'm optimistic in the sense that the more we're able to leverage alternative funding sources, and resources like coaching, scholarships, and so on, to help them be more prepared when they walk into that room, walk in with more revenue, when they're having those initial conversations. Those are the things that we kind of have control over. And I think the other thing that needs to be talked about is the majority of startups don't raise venture capital. Only 1% do. And so also reframing the narrative around what it means to be a successful business, and what it means to you. Is your company something that you want to grow and scale really quickly and have some type of exit? Okay, if that's true, then maybe venture capital is the route for you. But if your business is something that you want to run years and years down the line, you really want to be thoughtful and intentional about it, and make revenue the most important thing that you're focused on, then don't raise VC. You don't have to. I think the majority of the VC panels that I've listened to, the sentiment is always like, question if you want to raise it. Are you sure you want to do it? And I think the only story that's being told in the media is so-and-so raised a $1 million round, $3 million round, $100 million round, whatever. We've also seen kind of the shadow side of that, and maybe the lack of substance of companies that take that fast, scale quickly approach. So I think really what I'm focused on is reframing the narrative around what it means to be a successful business, and at the foundational level, helping women of color founders build stronger foundations.
Ladies, I have so many questions that I want to get to, but we're running out of time. I think in about 5 minutes, we're going to start the Q&A with our audience. So I have another question for Kim, and then another one for Kait, and hopefully we can get it done in that time. So for Kim, because you are an early stage investor and an advisor, and mentorship is so important to you, you're sort of filling that void that you're talking about. For anyone on our event who is a startup entrepreneur or someone who's looking to begin their business, what indicators are you looking for right now when you're investing in a startup? What sort of tells you, okay, this company or this product is going to be successful and be able to sort of weather the storm through the pandemic?
Yeah, so at the early stage, it's very much about the founder. So, you can, the first iteration of your product is not going to be the product that you are selling to the masses or giving to the masses, right? I mean, it's going to go through so many iterations. So even if you have the MVP and you understand your market and you understand, all right, I'm going to test it out with this user, like it may not be the end user that you're going to go after in your in your final quote unquote final version of the product. And that's okay. That's why it's early stage investing. It's much riskier. From the investing side, it's really about the founder. And what that means is the founder or founding team has to be able to run through walls to be able to get that product off the ground and get that company off the ground. And that is a combination of grit, intelligence, and essentially like a fierce sense of determination that is very hard and can become very lonely and is extremely difficult and challenging. So like everyone glorifies entrepreneurship today. It's much easier to start a business today than it was 10 years ago. But even with that said, it is still extremely difficult and it is still extremely lonely. And I need to be able to invest in someone that understands that, but is still willing to run through walls to get it done. And that's actually much harder to find than you would think. Because folks will say, you know, like, this is my company, I'm going to do whatever it takes, et cetera, et cetera. But words can be empty if actions don't back them up. And so that's really, when I'm talking to founders, like, that is what I'm looking for. And with a lot of founders I've spoken with, and anyone who I spend time with, my door is always open. You can see that immediately when you're talking to them. You will hear their trials and tribulations. You will hear everything that they've gone through to even get to that point, and they're still willing to keep going without giving up. And it's really easy to tell when somebody has that in them or not.
Kate, as someone who consults with clients and develops and implements these different social good programs, what would you say to corporate leaders or executives? And given this discussion, I think they're already sort of behind the curve if they're just now starting to implement a lot of these programs. But what would you say to these leaders who have not yet implemented programs that promote diversity and inclusion specifically for women right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think they kind of have to survive. I mean, the public is more aware, consumers are more aware. You know, it's good for business when they get stuff done. And so it's, you know, there's enough research and data out there that show the benefits of having a diverse team. And it's extremely important to hear different perspectives and to have a team that reflects the people that you're, you know, looking to engage, whether that's customers or your team. And, you know, it's becoming more and more important, not just because, you know, the news and different organizations are making this visible, but I think that it's almost becoming expected that companies are taking this seriously by kind of the next generation of employees and consumers. So I think that's really important, but it's also extremely important that if you are hiring more women and you have a diverse team, that you're also paying them equally, that you're treating them equally, that it's not just they're there to fill kind of a space that you feel like you need, that it is actually true and genuine. That I think is even more important, that you don't just kind of check boxes, but that you take this very seriously and make sure everyone is treated as they should be.
Ladies, you are so great on timing. I think this is a really good moment to open it up for everyone on our call. If you have any questions and you either want to ask it, I think you can ask it through your video right now. If you want to go ahead and show your camera, or you can drop it in the chat if you're feeling a little bit shy, and then I'll read it for you. So if you have any questions for the panel, go ahead and drop them right now. And if I don't get questions, I have about 100 more. So
I love
don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Yeah, I know as a host, we usually give the audience the first chance to ask questions. But if you guys still populate your questions, I will go ahead and ask the first one.
Yeah, go ahead, Summer.
Yes. So first of all, ladies, you did a great job. I learned so much. So my question, maybe like for Kim or Olivia specifically. So for startup, when they raise funds, all of a sudden they can scale. And once they scale very fast, they tend to have some challenges because they scale too fast. The companies such as Reformation or The Wing, they have had a lot of notorious incidents, especially for their employees. So I read an article, and the founder of The Wing said because they scale fast and they focus on scaling too fast, they lost a part of respecting their employees. So startup like Philly was thinking about to raise in the near future. So how could we keep our integrity, our values, because our whole company is about respect, integrity, values, diversity. But once we scale too fast, maybe like there are learning curves, there are some challenges that comes with scaling too fast. How can we keep our good values and integrity while we scale?
I think that is a very, very layered question. I think there, particularly with the wing example, I think there are a lot of kind of nuances that created the perfect storm that led to their kind of demise. But I think the first thing I'd say is raise what you need. Like, only take the funding that's going to help you get to the next point. When we look at crowdfunding, we believe that crowdfunding should be the first stop on every entrepreneur's funding journey to prove demand for their product or service before they invest in supply. And crowdfunding is not a tool that you leverage to fund the next 5 years of your business. It's to clearly get over an obstacle, whether you need to build out the prototype for your app or you need to manufacture the first line of your clothing line, whatever it is. I think it's a matter of raising what you need. And I also think that for the companies that scaled way too quickly, particularly the kind of female founder takedowns that we've seen, I think that female founders are being held to a higher standard than their male counterparts. That's not to say that there was a massive miss on the wing's part to revolutionize the way that you support employees, the same way that you want to revolutionize in the other ways that you create your business. So I think it's also on the flip side a level of intentionality on your part on what type of company do you really want to build and what areas might suffer for you to be able to create that image that you really want to see. That's from my perspective. I'm curious to hear what Kim has to say from the investor perspective.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I was like, anytime anyone mentions the wing these days, it's always very nuanced. So yeah, to your point, Olivia, this notion of kind of like female founded companies and like what's been happening in the last 12 months, there's a lot of loaded into that, right? I mean, outside of just like talking about a double standard that female founders are held to versus male founders and how they're able to get things done in the workplace. So a lot of what happened to the Away co-founder Steph Curry and her takedown in The Verge, talking about, you know, how she berated her employees over Slack and she was cursing and yelling and all. That stuff happens in startups all the time. Founders are under a lot of stress. I'm not excusing her behavior, but male founders are rewarded for that. Elon Musk is rewarded for that. Mark Zuckerberg was rewarded for that. He got a movie made after him for being such a douchebag. Excuse my language. Like, it's like, oh, like, no one's making a movie for Steph Curry. Like, no one's making a movie for her. She was, you know, getting kicked out by her board and like having board meetings to like figure out how to deal with the PR and if she should still be a part of the company. So that's a whole other issue. I think there's another layer on top of that, or actually underneath that, which is all of the women that have been taken down in the press that are female founders are white women. They're white women. Most of them come from very affluent backgrounds. If you look into their backgrounds, a majority of them, I think, if not all, went to private schools, grew up in Connecticut or upstate New York or Westchester or whatever. And I'm not trying to there's nothing wrong with being privileged. There's nothing wrong with growing up with privilege. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that just labeling all female founders and saying that it's affluent white women represent all female founders is a problem. And so that is a whole other conversation where you're essentially, it's similar to in the 1960s when it's like the feminist movement and like, I'm a feminist, but like who's actually like, what do we deem as like feminist rights versus like rights for all women? But all women can mean so many things in so many colors, so many shapes and sizes. It was kind of a similar issue where you had affluent white women at the front of it, but a lot of the issues that they were dealing with at the time didn't even apply to those women. And so like there's kind of this chasm and this misalignment, I think, and when we think about these things, and it's really hard because all women get lumped together. And it's tough because you don't want to, you're not going to say, I'm not for this woman, but I'm for this woman. Like that's not inclusive. That's not what people are about. And I always inherently try to believe that most people are good people. So it becomes a very complicated conversation. And then layer on the audiences you're speaking to and trying to have this conversation with without offending anyone. It's very difficult. And I've actually talked about this with a lot of people, which is how do you kind of like figure out, there's always going to be friction, but how do we start having this conversation amongst especially the investor community? Because at the end of the day, a lot of this behavior is enabled by investors because we don't actually check on our founders. We don't hold them accountable. We don't, as long as they're doing well and the investor update comes in and the arrows are all going this way and the margins all have positive like signs next to them, I don't really care. And that's the truth, unfortunately. And the question becomes, can we change that? Can we change that expectation? But nobody's holding investors accountable. So that's where you actually, that's the root of the problem, unfortunately.
Again, Kim, really appreciate how real you're being in this conversation. I think it's so helpful to get that insight, and also gives us an idea of a roadmap of maybe some of the different solutions that should be coming our way, or that maybe we can be empowered to create ourselves. I do have a question from Kate Kelly in our chat. It says, as it is Giving Tuesday tomorrow, as some of us are feeling the pains of COVID financially, what are some tricks or ways to make our donations go further, or what can we do in lieu of donating? So this one is for Kate.
Yeah, there's so much you can do. Really, the sky's the limit. You don't have to give financially. In fact, Giving Tuesday is mostly about, all kinds of generosity. It's not about the money. It's not fundraising Tuesday. It's Giving Tuesday. So we're seeing more and more individuals and organizations doing kind of some virtual volunteering projects. Lots of acts of kindness are being spread. If you can use your voice or your platform or your networks to share about a cause, you can donate goods. Like, we're all at home, clean out your closets, donate some goods. There's still people who need extra clothes and books and materials. Really, there's so much you can do. There are some great tools and resources on Giving Tuesday's website, which is givingtuesday.org. But I think anything small and large, all of it counts. So even if it's opening the door for your neighbor, that counts. So it's just this idea that we're learning kind of this generosity is contagious. So we're hoping that, every single act will just keep building, and that we'll just see this wave of generosity around the world tomorrow.
I also consult for a nonprofit, so I'm going to chime in here and say, this is also not sponsored, by the way, but if you're finishing up your holiday gift list, or you're doing your Cyber Monday, late Black Friday shopping, trying to get all those deals, and you're on Amazon, you can go on Amazon Smile and designate a portion of what you purchase to go toward a designated charity. So that's a sneaky way. Also, if you're already shopping for people, just designate a charity, and that way some of the proceeds of what you purchase can go toward that charity. And I'm sure there are a lot of different platforms and ways that you can do that as well. We also have a question from Brony that says, thanks, Olivia, Kate, and Kim. If you had the opportunity, what would you have done differently with your business, product, service, career? By the way, I'm so honored to be the only male in the room. Go, Roni.
I love it. So from the entrepreneurship side, I think that perfect is the enemy of done. like Kim said, the first iteration is not going to be the thing that's there down the road, but at the end of the day, you want to get something out there. You want to fail fast, you want to fail cheap, put it out there, see if there's demand for it, and if not, it'll get you to the next thing. From a career side, I think I stayed at a job too long because I felt like I owed something to the company. I was really passionate about it, but they weren't paying me enough. They didn't hire enough people to do the job that needed to be done. And I felt really, really kind of attached to my team and a responsibility to not let them down. And like, none of that is real. They will rehire you in a second. Look out for yourself first, always. You are not to stay.
Yeah, I think for me, this is the first time where I've had an experience where I'm like, is this where I want to be? Right? Like, even if I'm doing something for only a few months, I'm actually thinking about my own self-worth and the fact that you may be in a position where you may have more opportunities than you think, and you can actually take a step back and choose. And that's a very special position to be in. And I think it's the first time where I realized, like, oh, what is that like? And like how to navigate those types of situations. Because it can be overwhelming, especially if you've never understood your own self-worth before. And to me, it's like something I'm actually going through right now. And I think a lot of women deal with this because, you know, throughout your life, you work hard, you know, you're told if you work hard, you'll get the merit. It's like merit based, but you know, that's not always the case as you go on in your career. And so like you work hard, and then it comes to a point where like it may actually all come to fruition, and random doors will start opening up that you didn't even expect. And so now you're being asked, well, what do you actually want? And you have no idea how to think about it because you were just really working towards this, like, I guess this moment where opportunities start to present themselves. And that's when real mentorship comes into play. That's when having a strong support system comes into play. And I think the one thing I will say I'm grateful for is not even realizing it, but having built that very early on in my career, especially with other women. And it's one of the reasons I think I've gotten through my various career shifts, because I've now on my third career pivot in less than 10 years. And I think the only way I was able to do that was because of my support system. But I do wish that I understood what it meant to build relationships with mentors. But I kind of looked for that mentorship in my own peer group. And I found that to be very helpful. But there were times where I do not necessarily regret, but I'm learning that I need to start to figure out how to build those going forward. Otherwise, thinking through some of these things becomes very difficult and complicated, and you don't know what you should be prioritizing, and you tend to second guess yourself. And that's kind of the certain career transition I'm actually in right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, as someone who's building their own business, I think I would do a lot differently. Looking back, to be honest, I'm learning things every single day. But you know, that's part of it. And I think something, you know, I realize I've been very, very lucky to both be in the right place at the right time and be able to work on some great projects and meet amazing people. But something that I wish I did differently, and that I should do differently still, is knowing when to ask for help. That's really hard and to kind of admit that you need that help, especially we're expected to just keep going, but to take that moment and to seek help, you know, even if it's just having someone to talk to, and to really, you know, I wish I had some mentors early on. That's something I'm catching up on now. And so having that early on, a support network that Kim talked about, that's just incredibly valuable. And that's something that I'm hoping to build, even though I'm a little late to the game.
appreciate all of you ladies joining this panel. Summer, Jax. Oh, it looks like we are going to wrap up, but I do want to wish you guys the best and thank you again for joining this panel. I think especially working in any sort of sector that is related to nonprofit or giving back, it can be extremely draining and can lead to burnout. So I'm wishing all of you the best, especially during this time. Everything that you're doing is so needed. So we thank you not only for your insight, but also for the work that you're doing for your communities and for women in business. We really, really appreciate you joining us. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic back to Summer and Jax.
Thank you.
And they'll go ahead and wrap up.
Thank you so much, Asia. Thank you, everyone. Kate, Olivia, Kim, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, for being here tonight with our community, talk about mentors and peer-to-peer mentorship. That's really what Philly stands for. That's what we're doing here. And just hearing your personal stories, perseverance, ways that we can give back, get involved, and start to change some of those conversations and statistics. That would be the goal and outcome of this conversation tonight. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your energy, and I'll pass it over to Summer now.
Yes, ladies, thank you so much. We're so grateful. And also shout out to our founding team. Catherine, our head of house. It's already 8 p.m. and Kat is still on and she really doesn't have to. So shout out to Kat. And also Kate Kelly, our head of partnership. Kate helped craft the whole panel and she's mastermind before the whole idea. So thank you so much, ladies. And also, ladies, I dropped Philly's website, phillynyc.com. We do accept Philly Mastermind applications. So if you're interested in us, check us out. Also, we have Philly Tribe. If you want to become a tribe member, also feel free to join us. And we do active listening every month, and we hope to see you back next month. And if you have any good ideas you think we should be active listening to, feel free to send us an email and tell us about your feedback, your questions, your insights. And ladies, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.